why not do the obvious? Why not begin at the beginning? So I'm going to read to you from the prologue. I don't know why people write prologues. One young editor told me it was completely inappropriate. And I tried to look up the meaning and I haven't found it. But I think the reason I included the prologue was to link an earlier time, say between 1857 and 1947, to the present day reader. So you could connect with it. You know, you could see Mumbai 2000, you could feel you're not too far away from that time. So here it is, the prologue. I have come back to the old house to see it again, one last time. Tomorrow we will begin to break it down, to take it apart stone by stone, brick by brick, like the pieces of my heart. They say it is better this way. No one wants to live here anymore, in this ancient mansion with its brooding shadows and forgotten dreams. Certainly not the younger generation. They would much rather peddle their ancestral home for paltry pieces of silver and move into shiny new apartments far removed from the ghosts of their forefathers. The builders have been hovering around like vultures for a long time, watching in greedy anticipation as decay and dissonance destroy what once seemed like a timeless edifice. They can sense a kill in the making and are waiting for the first scent of blood to close in. I can't blame them really. It is after all one of the few great houses that still remain, with a generous acreage and a panoramic view of the sea, one of the last bastions to have held out against the ensnaring tentacles of a rapidly expanding metropolis and the inexorable surge of a new tide, a new time. I walk through dust-laden rooms, brushing aside silken cobwebs. The bare walls echo my aching emptiness. Nothing remains of the grand old mansion of my childhood. The gleaming marble floor has been ripped off to embellish someone else's home. The glittering chandeliers that once illumined the lives of those that lived here light up other lives. The sweeping Belgian mirrors that reflected their hopes and aspirations now reflect different dreams. Everything is gone. The fine period furniture, the splendid tapestries, the ornate carvings, the exquisite stained glass windows, the Persian carpets which would have done the Shah proud. Even the grand mahogany staircase which my father assured me read light up to the stars. Take it all, I told them. I want no part of the spoils, no part of the dismemberment of my grandfather's dream. I bid farewell to corners poignant with memories and take a last lingering look so I can remember it all when it is no more. Suddenly something catches my eye. Something glitters between the layers of dust and debris, a lone survivor amid the ravage. I bend down to retrieve a golden frame with my grandfather's portrait in sepia. Through the shuttered glass, he smiles up at me. It's all right, he seems to say. This too had to come to pass. Life's endless cycle must go on. Nothing else remains. Nothing of the joys and sorrows, the tears and laughter, the pains, the passions, the pretensions of that splendid era, or of those that once dwelt in this house. Nothing save the solitary portrait. It is almost as if Bapaji willed that he be here until the bitter end, to urge unknown hands be gentle as they dismantle his dreams, for this was after all his home, and this is his story, not mine. It is just as well that he is here to witness its narration. This is in the voice of his granddaughter, a contemporary of mine, I would say, obviously also fictional. I will do a couple of more small readings, and then I think we can open to Q&As. Would you like another reading? Okay. All right. Then I have two in mind. One is when he first comes. This is about Lalji Laka. He's orphaned at 6, and both his parents die. And his mother on her deathbed has told him that he must go to this particular address in a faraway place also in Kutch. And he finally gets there. He's never met these people before. And he's all alone, far away from home. And this is what ensues. This is the home he's come to. Have you gone out of your mind, woman? Stormed Remu, who had come home in a cross mood after a long day in the market and a tiring journey home. An unknown child knocks on your door and you're all ready to take him in and embrace him as your own. By all means feed him, clothe him, let him rest the night if it makes you feel better, but back him off first thing tomorrow. But he is not a stranger, his wife interjected mildly. He has a slip of paper bearing your name. Paper? What paper? Demanded Remu. Frowning, he took the frayed piece of paper from her hand. Come here, boy, he said gruffly. Lalji shrank back against the woman's skirt. Come here, let me look at you. Remu's wife gently pushed him forward. Who are you? What's your name? Remu asked. Lalji, he replied, awed by this big man and his big house and his big voice. Who sent you here? Remu boomed, but not unkindly. Lalji gestured towards the paper as if it answered all things. I've seen that, but where have you come from? Who gave this to you? Ba, ventured Lalji, looking at the man with large, unblinking eyes. Your mother? What is her name? What is your father's name? Lalji pursed his lips. He knew their names, of course, but all that crowded his mind now was a sense of confusion. He stood there silently and stared at his feet. I don't see what we can do with this unknown child, the man said to his wife. We will have to send him back to where he came from. I wish you'd had the sense to hold back the person who bought him. A sadhu, you say? A fakir? How strange. Lalji felt a rising sense of panic. They were going to send him back. He couldn't let them send him away. He had promised Ba he would come here, that he would be all right. They are dead, he finally said in a small voice. Both Remu and his wife turned to look at him with new interest. Ba said you were a good man, that you would give me some work. He said to tell you we did not want charity. Remu looked at him curiously. Can you remember her name? Did she give you anything? A letter maybe? Yes, said Lalji excitedly as he remembered. He dived into his shirt pocket and took out the silver locket his mother had entrusted to him. She told me to give you this, he said, handing it over to the man. So you would know that I was her son. Remu took the locket from the child's hand and stared at it. He turned it over, shaking his head in disbelief. It can't be, he muttered. Rajo? Are you Rajo's son? Lalji brightened and nodded eagerly. Of course that was his mother's name. Yes, said Remu, scanning his face. I can see you have a beautiful brown eyes, a lovely smile. But for the rest, you are the image of your father. I see the resemblance now. The same stubborn chin, that full sensuous mouth, that cocky air. Lalji detected the change in the man's tone when he spoke of his father. Remu looked at the boy for a long while, but his thoughts had drifted far away to a time long past. I'll do one more reading. Okay, this comes back, and the story is very predictable. There's nothing new. They're all stereotypes. They're deliberately so, because my contention is that it is the ordinary stories that are so extraordinary, and we all have stories, and they are special to us. So this is this boy, and when he comes in, there's a little girl, so you know right from that moment that they are going to fall in love. I mean, it's nothing new, you've heard in a million stories. Anyway, he has, that same thing happens, and then they part, and he goes away, and he comes back. He's been away for he leaves his uncle's house at 16, and comes back when he's about 4, 5, 6 years later, in his early 20s. And there is an old Masi who is grown up in the house, and both these occupy that uncertain position in the Remu Mamu's household, they're neither relative nor are they servant. There's that in-between thing. And so they've become very close. And the Masi has taken this orphan child under her wing. So now when he comes back at 21, 22, and the first person he comes across is Masi. And this is the interaction that goes on from there. Masi shook her wise old head. It was her you really came to see, was it not? You still haven't got her out of your system. I want to marry her, Masi, Lalji confessed all in a rush. Take her away with me, start a new life. Masi